Arkansas will get its first look tomorrow at two proposals for new monuments outside the state capitol.
But these monuments fall on opposite ends of the spectrum. One is a statue of the Ten Commandments. The other is a monument from the Satanic Temple.
Well, David and Jennifer, the two proposals stem from a bill passed by Arkansas lawmakers last year that would allow the Ten Commandments to be built on grounds there at the state capitol. Well, the Satanic Temple says its proposal for a statue should be allowed also, and it wants to sit right next to, within 20 feet of the Ten Commandments. The Satanic Temple's proposed statue for the Capitol lawn is expected to look something like this, called Baphomet. The group says the half-man, half-animal symbolizes the reconciliation of opposites, in this case, opposing religious views. As for the Ten Commandments, it's unknown what the monument might look like, but it's expected to weigh around 6,000 pounds, stand 6 feet tall, and be paid for by private donations. While seemingly the latest chapter in the battle over separation of church and state, most residents we spoke with in Harrison say they're not on board with the Satanic Temple's proposal.
It's debatable. I mean, everybody's got their choice, but I mean, if you can't go by the Ten Commandments, something wrong with you.
We are a godly nation. We are based upon Christianity. I think the Ten Commandments should be on there.
The sponsor of the bill to allow the Ten Commandments at the Capitol says the monument would signify the foundation of law in the country. But the Satanic Temple says only allowing the Christian display would give the appearance of the government endorsing a particular religion.
It's America. We have freedom of speech. We've fought for that, and I think that it's important that everyone is allowed to say what they think.
I'm all for the Ten Commandments, anywhere and everywhere. And you start putting other monuments up, where does it stop?
The buck may stop with the Arkansas Secretary of State, who's scheduled to review both proposals tomorrow. But, as has been the case in other states, the final decision could play out in the courtroom. Now, there has also been discussion of putting up a wall in between the two statues if both end up being approved. Now, again, the Secretary of State is expected to review both of those proposals tomorrow afternoon.
Today marked the 15th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. President Obama called on Americans to embrace the nation's character as a people drawn from every corner of the world, from every religion and from every background. Obama said, "We know that our diversity, our patchwork heritage is not a weakness. It still and will always be one of our greatest strengths."
Amid a troubling series of stories showing Muslim students facing discrimination, abuse, and harassment, the U.S. Department of Education is going to increase its monitoring of Islamophobia in public schools. Last week, the department announced a series of initiatives to more closely watch for possible violations of federal anti-discrimination laws in schools. For the first time, the agency's Office for Civil Rights said it would require schools to report the number of incidents of religious-based bullying or harassment. The department created an updated online form for filing discrimination complaints. The department also announced a new website explaining U.S. laws on religious discrimination, a collaboration with the Justice Department, and several other initiatives.
Let's start with the earthquake that struck Korea's southeastern region last night. The 5.8 magnitude quake, the strongest ever recorded in Korea, hit just outside the southeastern city of Gyeongju at 8:35 p.m. Korea time. Fortunately, no one was killed, but 6 people were injured as buildings shuddered from side to side. No serious damage to infrastructure was reported, but scores of buildings were moderately damaged by the tremor. Nuclear reactors in the area were not seriously affected, but some reactors were taken offline as a precautionary measure late last night and remain offline as of now. A few KTX bullet trains halted operations, and Korea's popular mobile messenger KakaoTalk actually went offline shortly after the quake, but they are both running as normal now. This earthquake came about 50 minutes after an initial quake with a 5.1 magnitude hit the epicenter some 10 kilometers south of Gyeongju. Government authorities have heightened the country's emergency level to level 2, which is the second highest, and ordered affiliated organizations to remain alert and follow the earthquake manual.
Weeks of severe flooding have devastated North Korea, as these recent images from Chinese media show. Typhoon Lionrock tore through the northwestern border region of the country last month, near the Tumen River, destroying thousands of homes and leaving more than 140,000 people in need of urgent assistance. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, citing figures from Pyongyang, the new death toll on Monday was 133 people, with another 395 missing. 107,000 people were forced to flee their homes in the Tumen River area, while 16,000 hectares of farmland have been inundated, adding to fears that North Korea's chronic food shortages would worsen.
North Korea's food supplies this year are expected to fall short by 660,000 tons. Voice of America cites the UN Food and Agriculture Organization's third quarter report, which said Pyongyang will need to have made up 694,000 tons of food through imports or foreign aid between last November and this October. But as of last month, the North had secured just a fraction of that at 29,000 tons. The FAO said this means Pyongyang is in fact worse off than in their second quarter report. The organization has therefore put North Korea on its list of 36 countries that need outside help to overcome their food shortages.
The nation is vulnerable to natural disasters, especially floods, due to widespread deforestation that allows rainwater to flow downhill unchecked. But state media announced over the weekend that despite, quote, great hardships suffered by the North Korean people, the government was working hard to reopen roads and distribute relief goods and building materials. They released images showing recovery work being done, praising the government for transforming a 200-day labor campaign into an emergency relief operation. The last major storm in the country killed 169 people in 2012, and a series of floods and droughts was partially responsible for a famine that killed hundreds of thousands in the late 90s.
Just a week after using profane language to describe President Obama, the president of the Philippines says he wants all U.S. troops to leave the country. President Rodrigo Duterte made those comments during a passionate speech in Manila, in which he blamed the presence of Americans for recent violence by Muslim militants in the country's south.
Duterte said, quote, "Those special forces, they have to go. In Mindanao, there are a lot of whites there. They have to go." He continued, "I do not want a rift with America, but they have to go. It will just get more tense if they," and here he means the Muslim militants, "if they see Americans there, they will really kill them. They will try to get ransom, then they will kill them." Duterte did not set any kind of deadline for the removal of troops, and U.S. officials have also avoided comment so far.
A nationwide ceasefire brokered by Russia and the United States has come into effect in Syria. Russia's foreign ministry said it hopes the US exerts due influence on the so-called moderate opposition groups it supports so they abide by the terms of the truce deal. The US Secretary of State said early reports point to some reduction of hostilities. Hours before the ceasefire deal came into effect, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad vowed to take back all of Syria. State television showed him visiting Daraya, a Damascus suburb long held by rebels but recaptured last month after fighters surrendered in the face of a crushing siege. Russia said it would use drones and radar to fully monitor the situation in the conflict zone.
It's a long wait under the unrelenting sun. For the past week, millions of refugees have been returning to Syria to visit their families and celebrate one of the most holy festivals in the Muslim calendar. The crossing is only possible from this border post situated around 50 kilometers from the city of Aleppo and Idlib.
It's always better to be there. In Syria we are with family, with neighbors, and it makes Eid really joyful. It's true they are making us wait, but it's not a problem. What's hard is that we have to walk for a very long time, we carry our kids, our belongings. That's the most difficult.
If there's the slightest chance I see my mother after 3 years, then the journey will be worth it. I've forgotten her smell. I hope I can see her even if it's just for 3 seconds.
The blast hit close to the provincial governor's office, targeting the ruling AK party of President Tayyip Erdogan. It ripped through the city center, setting buildings and cars on fire. No one was killed, but police say 27 people were wounded. No one took immediate responsibility, but security sources blamed the militant Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, and have launched an operation to pursue suspected militants. This is the latest in a series of attacks in the region since 2015, when the PKK, which has been fighting for Kurdish autonomy for decades, abandoned a ceasefire. It comes one day after the government removed 24 mayors in the region for suspected ties to the PKK, a move the pro-Kurdish opposition says was an illegal administrative coup.
There have been clashes in Naples between police and protesters demonstrating against a visit by Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. The rally was organised by several left-wing activists and teachers opposing the government's new school reforms. The protest lasted 2 hours, during which demonstrators tried to break through police cordons, throwing dustbins and setting off flares.
Police opened fire to quell rioting that erupted in the Indian technology hub of Bengaluru on Monday. An official said at least one person was killed and another wounded. The riots are over a long-running river water dispute with the neighboring state. After protesters set cars and buses on fire and pelted people with stones, L. Chandrasekhar, a senior police officer, told Reuters 15 policemen were wounded. While police said the local metro network had been temporarily suspended, riot police took to the streets, and public gatherings were banned in a bid to rein in the unrest. A Reuters witness saw a group of 20 to 30 protesters stopping and searching cars. Some were armed with sticks and stones. Local television showed flames pouring from burnt-out vehicles as angry crowds gathered nearby.
Health has been brought to the forefront of the US election campaign. Following the release of Hillary Clinton's pneumonia diagnosis, her opponent Donald Trump has promised to disclose detailed results of his recent medical examination.
This last week I took a physical, and I'll be releasing when the numbers come in. Hopefully they're going to be good. I think they're going to be good. I feel great. But when the numbers come in, I'll be releasing very specific numbers.
At an event in the state of Maryland on Monday, Trump once again reacted to Clinton's remark that half his supporters are a basket of deplorables. His opponent expressed regret a day after making the comment.
You cannot run for president if you have such contempt in your heart for the American voter. And she does. You can't lead this nation if you have such a low opinion for its citizens.
But it seems not everyone agrees with him. Most opinion polls up until Sunday suggested Clinton still had the edge in the presidential race, while the so-called soft opening of a Trump hotel in Washington drew a crowd protesting against his policies.
Let me ask you about that, because David Axelrod was very critical of the way that you and your campaign handled sharing your diagnosis with the public. He tweeted, "Antibiotics can take care of pneumonia. What's the cure for an unhealthy penchant for privacy that repeatedly creates unnecessary problems?" Why not just say on Friday, as you said apparently to Senator Schumer on Sunday, I have pneumonia, folks. I'm going to power through it. Why keep it a secret?
Well, I just didn't think it was going to be that big a deal. I know Chuck said today he didn't tell anybody. It's just the kind of thing that if it happens to you and you're a busy, active person, you keep moving forward.
把性偏离视为一种反自然的亵渎行为或反社会的罪行。常见的性偏离的主要类型有同性恋。
Betting on your money. Nearly a 400-point drop Friday for the Dow. We will be down 40, 50 points this morning when we open. Keith Fitzgerald is with us, nice and early. Is this just Federal Reserve jitters, or is there something else going on, Keith?
I think it is Federal Reserve jitters, but it's not just the U.S. Fed. I think traders got very, very nervous when Mario Draghi said, you know what, we've done about as much as we can do. In the pot calling the kettle black, it's a fiscal problem that politicians need to fix. That's a complete anathema. Politicians can't fix this because they caused it in the first place.
Planes are actively spraying a powerful pesticide called Naled to fight Zika near Miami Beach starting this past Friday, despite a week of protests over concerns about the insecticide. The protesters were able to stave off the spray, but only for a day. Similar use of Naled to combat Zika in South Carolina this month ended up killing around 3 million bees. Naled is widely used in the U.S. for mosquito control, especially after hurricanes and floods. Though it's approved by the EPA, the European Union banned the chemical back in 2012, saying it's dangerous to aquatic life and humans.
After the Flint, Michigan water crisis, America's eyes have been on their drinking water. A new study shows a sharp increase in the number of water system-borne infections and the cost of their treatment in the last 15 years. Researchers at Tufts University found pathogens in public water systems are taking a toll on the health and wallets of Americans because of the rising cost of treating the increasing number of bacterial infections they cause. Some of the infections could be tied to increasing antibiotic resistance. The vast majority of what may be preventable infections, however, could be controlled with targeted disinfection and better surveillance of water systems, say researchers involved with the study.
It only took 24 hours for Super Typhoon Meranti, which is threatening Taiwan and mainland China, to roar from the equivalent of a Category 1 storm to a top-scale Category 5. Meranti is forecast to make landfall along the southern tip of the island of Taiwan, home to more than 23 million people, on Wednesday morning local time. Fortunately, most of the population lives on the northern and western side of the island. Even though Meranti, which likely will still be a super typhoon at landfall on the southern tip, the entire island will feel the storm's wrath.
Scientists have discovered a mysterious island in Argentina that rotates on its own axis. The landmass at the center of the island is called the Eye. That's located in swampy marshes of Parana Delta in Argentina's north. Scientists say the island has existed since at least 2003. It's around 180 meters in diameter and sits on a pond of water which is clear, cold, and in deep contrast with its surrounding area. New findings suggest the circle not only rotates on its own axis, but is also leaning in various sectors on the wall of the outer circle that contains it.
Large earthquakes have a higher chance of happening during full and new moons, finds a new study out of Japan. The reason for the increased risk, the researchers have found, is because fault lines tend to become more strained as the tides get higher and heavier than normal when the Earth, Moon, and Sun are aligned. High tides, which happen twice a day, have been linked with tremors in certain places. But this study takes a broader look by examining events of at least 5.5 in magnitude. These include a 9.3 magnitude Sumatra quake in 2004 and an 8.8 magnitude Chilean quake from 2010. After recording the severity of tidal stresses in the 15 days leading up to the event, the team found that the vast majority struck around the time of a full or new moon.